Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. The agenda for today is to give you a macro view on economics of US wealth extraction mechanism. That is how money flows from developing countries like India to US. How is US able to extract the real wealth from country like us in exchange of paper bills, that is USD, which are generated at a fraction of cost, and why Modi ji's call for consumption of Indian good in India is a real need. This can also give you a direction to diversify your investments into different markets like US. Let's understand the meaning of real resource extraction. Let's take example of clothes. India is one of the major exporter of clothes to US. To create clothes, we need to grow cotton. Growing cotton on a scale needs big land, lot of labor, resources like water and energy. Once the cotton is ready, it goes through an industrial cycle to convert cotton into clothes and to color the clothes. This industrial cycle uses our resources like electricity, water, etc. And every finished good that we produce as an output has a waste associated to it. This waste goes into our environment in the form of air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, etc. What US gets is a ready to use cloth, clean air to breathe, and clean water to drink. Let us see what US gives us in return. In return, we get dollar printed in a dollar printing press or even digital more often. Let us see what the mathematical reality of this extraction is. To generate 100 USD, US only spends 15 cents, which means US takes almost 99.85% profit for every dollar generated. As per our last year export numbers, we did $87 billion worth of exports. To generate $87 billion, it took US just $130 million. What it means is that every dollar that US generate, it is able to extract $669 worth of real wealth from India. What it essentially means is that US has become a consumption economy where US can generate USD, and in return, other countries like India are generating the real good, which is then consumed back into US. Let us see the dollar standard wealth extraction mechanism, which is how this entire thing is working. So it typically starts with the production phase where Indian companies would generate goods, let's say worth of $87 billion annually. Then it goes into export phase where our companies are trying to export the goods back into US consumers who are going to pay for these goods in dollar terms. Then is the accumulation phase where Indian companies are receiving dollars, but typically the example that we saw for clothes, Indian company needs rupees to work with. And therefore, the banking phase starts, where Indian banks start accumulating dollar and sell it to RBI. RBI then further invest these dollars back into US treasuries and US assets. If they don't, then the value of dollars will keep on going down. And once they invest it back, the dollars that we got from US originally again goes back into the consumption phase, which then US again uses to consume for further goods and services. You might be wondering how this can be working. How is US able to extract such a big real wealth? It is coming out of the capital recycling mechanism, which is cleverly built where US gets the access to real good flow. The countries, not just India, are exporting about 3.36 trillion in goods and services to US annually. Out of it, almost 50% is coming from US components. Rest is a pure wealth extraction mechanism. Then next phase where the dollar accumulates overseas, which is example when we export, we get dollars. If Bangladesh exports, they are also getting dollars. Now, every foreign exporters needs to decide what they need to do with the dollars. Most of the cases, countries need dollar to purchase oil as part of petrodollar supply. Central bank also accumulate dollar as the reserve currency because USD is treated as the most stable currency in the world. But then is the key where the recycling and the finance phase for further US consumption starts. Foreign investors typically they hold trillions of dollars in US treasuries. In 2025 alone, the foreign investors purchased 352 billion worth of US treasuries. Also, the oil exports investment, the petrol dollar system, these investments also goes back into US treasuries via bonds, stocks, real estate, etc. And the financial instrument which handles this entire ecosystem then keep on moving as a circle. This entire mechanism seems unbreakable because of the advantage that US has as a reserve currency. We can even take example outside of our developing countries. Let's take example of a trade which is happening between a Dutch producer who is producing crude oil and is trying to sell it to Swiss trading house. Now, Dutch producer will typically issue an invoice to Swiss trading house, let's say for $40 million. The invoice is received by Swiss trading house, let's say Credit Suisse. At this time, the invoice cannot be cleared in euros because the trade is for crude oil. The entire petro dollar system makes sure that this transaction is happening in USD. Now, what will happen? Swiss company Credit Suisse will issue a payment trigger. This payment trigger will go to a US bank via Swiss bank. Let's say BNY Mellon is receiving a payment trigger for 40 million USD. Again, the US bank, which is linked to Credit Suisse, is not going to transfer directly to Dutch supplier. This will send the US transactions to another US bank, let's say Bank of America, which is then linked to the Dutch producer. And at this time, the Bank of America will make a transaction to the Dutch producer from 40 million USD to, let's say, an equivalent amount in euro. And then our Dutch producer is going to receive the final payment. You can see the entire complexity. And across all these, there are two EU bank and two US banks involved, whereas the transaction could have directly happened in euro. But because of this entire mechanism of reserve currency, today it's very difficult to have these transactions. Now let's see the impact of dollar flow for US companies. We have seen the capital recycling mechanism where the US dollars, once they are out uh, due to exports, move back again into Federal Reserves via investments from foreign investors. These dollars are then moved from Federal Reserves to US banks, let's say Bank of America and another type of banks. These banks will have a lot of dollars handy with them, and then they tend to give these dollars to bigger companies at a very low interest rates. These companies, example, Tesla, Amazon, ChatGPT, and there can be many other companies that are receiving these dollars. Now, since these companies have access to such a big amount of dollar, they are able to invest these dollars into research and development, into paying salaries, big hefty number salaries for engineers coming from India, coming from China, or coming from across the world. And since they have the power of research, they're able to generate new technologies faster and faster. That is the core reason you are able to see companies like Tesla, SpaceX, ChatGPT coming out of US and nowhere else in the world. So there are some reasons behind such dominance. Some of these reasons are already listed here. Example, military power, petrodollar system, reserve currency, network effect, and correspondent banking. But then there are many more, and we will see these reasons in I hope you found the video informative. We are almost reaching end, and if it is informative, please do like and subscribe. And I'll try to make more videos on US dominance and other factors. Hope to see you soon in the other videos. Thank you.